Hello, and welcome to the live series Straight Off the Bat. Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals from multiple industries that will help you understand financial literacy and education. If you're joining us from Facebook, thank you so much. Don't forget to like and follow our page to stay updated with content that will help you manage your money. I'm your host, Pauline Joseph, and conversations around entrepreneurship in Trinidad and Tobago are more important than ever, especially for those ready to turn big ideas into real action. And today we're talking about how to do mid-year financial check-in for 2025. Our guest today is Andre Falvey. He is a seasoned banking professional with over 30 years of experience in risk management, business lending, and corporate and investment banking. He currently serves as a chief risk officer. Sorry, I got a little excited there. At Trinidad and Tobago Mortgage Bank, where he leads the bank enterprise risk management functions. And he holds an international MBA and a specialization in finance. And he's also a dystopian sci-fi TV series fanatic. So I think now is a great time to bring him in because now more than ever, we are living in a kind of dystopian, kind of dystopian, somewhat.
I won't go so far as saying dystopia, but
Well, I mean, in terms of
Mm,
our financial decisions, let's be
mm,
and I may be internalizing this
yeah,
because you're scrolling through Instagram and you're like, I have to get
yeah.
this. Do you really though? So
Mm.
let's get straight into it because 60 minutes for a lot of people feels like a lot, but there's so much to cover. How are you today though, Andre?
Hi, Pauline. I'm good. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I feel like this session is going to be a little bit therapeutic for me because I feel like
Mhm.
I need this, but I'm pretty sure the folks out there will agree. And we will definitely have their comments and answer their comments as we go through
Mhm.
the show today. So we're going to start with why is a mid year financial check in important, and to make what
Mm.
someone feel like they're going on track in some direction.
Okay, so why is it important? Just imagine, Pauline, that you're cruising down the highway. There's no traffic. Your favorite playlist is pumping, and you're feeling good. But feeling good is not the same as knowing you're good. Now, if you're on your way to the beach, you're probably going to make a pit stop. You're going to stop at the service station. You're going to check your tires. You're going to fill up the tank. Going to make sure there's ice in the cooler, and then you're going to make sure that Waze is still pointing you in the right direction. So that checkup is about moving away from that vague feeling that maybe I'm okay, maybe I'm not okay, to an ironclad understanding of where am I? Where am I? Am I actually hitting my savings rate? Am I hitting my goals? So it's this check-in is not it's not a chore, it's not a punishment. It's about celebrating your progress and taking a strategic look at what's next, not just hoping you get somewhere, but guaranteeing that you get somewhere.
Okay, and let's shift this conversation specifically to someone who may be in the entrepreneurial space.
Mhm.
What are some of the key numbers someone should review when doing this mid-year check-in?
Okay, well, I mean, whether you're an entrepreneur or even employed, some key figures look at would be things like your gross income. You know, um, you don't really beat yourself up thinking, okay, what's my after tax and take home and stuff. Look at your gross. What are you grossing? All right, and this is a pretty easy figure for entrepreneurs because they're seeing the funds coming into their account, right? Or they're seeing cash in hand. So the gross income tells you what I've actually earned so far. Next, you want to look at your savings rate. You know, are you hitting some important number? And normally that number should be a percentage of your income. So it could be 10%, 5%, 15%, you know. Um, and why you want to look at a percent is that a dollar value is not the same for everyone. $500 doesn't mean the same to everybody. $1,000 does not mean the same to everybody. All right. But percentages, I'm going to save 10% of my income. I'm going to save 20% of my income. That personalize it. That brings it home to you. All right. Um, you might also want to look at your spending allocation. As an individual, um, how much of your income is going towards your fixed cost? Things like your bills, your housing, your investments, and and even your guilt-free spending, which we'll talk a bit more later on. You've got to have some level of spending that is guilt-free, that you just spend the money and you don't have to worry about it, and you don't have to feel bad that I'm spending this money. All right. And one last big number, I want to say your net worth. You know, that's your assets, that's everything you got, minus your liabilities, that's all the money you owe, your loans and stuff. And what's the difference? The difference is what really belongs to you. And you want to look at that net worth because your net worth should be increasing every month, every year. As you go through life, you should be getting richer and richer, increasing that net worth.
Wow. So there are a lot of things to
Mhm.
aspire to here. And I made some
Yeah.
notes for myself as well as for the folks who
Mhm.
are watching this. I wanted
Mhm.
to tack back a little bit on this conversation around savings rates,
Mhm.
especially since a lot of entrepreneurs don't have enough money to put aside for a rainy
Mhm.
day. Most of
Mhm.
it, if not all of it, is going back into the business. So you're talking about this check-in, but for somebody who's watching this and thinking, well, I don't even have
Mhm.
a little 500 to put aside every year,
Mhm.
every month, sorry. What kind of advice would you give to that
Mhm.
person? Because obviously they are focused on building a business for profit.
Mhm.
But when you're
Yeah.
doing that check in, it might be a little different when you're running a business.
Mhm. Agreed. But you know what? Sometimes when we say I don't have money to put aside, but do I really not have any money to put aside? And if you find yourself in that position, I think the first thing you need to do is look at, where is my money going? Because money is being spent, all right? And you know, is it that 80% of your money is being spent on your fixed expenses? Are you spending 50% of your income on rent? Are you spending 30% on food? You know, and in most cases it may not be that large. You may find that you're probably spending a lot of money on things that you can change. Let's take eating out, for example. um, all of us eat out, probably more than we should. We probably buy lunch every day. As you're a busy entrepreneur, you're running your business, you probably don't have time to cook often, so you're buying lunch a lot. But you probably cook sometimes. And probably if you look at your spending pattern, and take something, take a look for receipts. Take your credit card statement, go online and just do a quick 30-day history on your credit card and see where's your money going. And if you see that, actually 40% of my money, or even a dollar figure, if X amount is probably going on eating out, could I change that a little, or change it a lot? Not saying never eat out again, or anything like that, but you know, where's a room to make some changes? And that's kind of what you need to get to. We want to get to a stage where you can, I don't even want to say budget, but you want to make a conscious spending plan. Because whatever we're spending, there must be a purpose. If you're spending money on your business to grow your business, you should be seeing some returns. Am I spending $1,000 a month on a business and getting 1,100 in return? If that's the case, then is that business really worth it? But tracking your spending, you might probably find that, yeah, I'm actually doing better than I think. Maybe it's where the spending is going.
Wow, there seems to be
Mhm.
a lot of
Yeah.
existential
Yeah.
reviewing and internal self-awareness I have to go through here,
Yeah.
as well as those out there who are watching this. Don't
Mhm.
forget, you can head over to the comments and ask any questions to
Mhm.
Andre as the Chief Risk Officer at Trinidad and Tobago Mortgage Bank. I'm sure a lot of
Mhm.
us have a lot to learn
Yeah.
from his 30 plus year
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
So, I mean, although in August, somebody
Mhm.
might be watching us through like mid-year, we're beyond that. It's too late
Mhm.
for me. I'll wait till December
Mhm.
to review. What advice would you have for somebody who wants to evaluate right now?
um, do it right now. It's evaluate. You need to look at. You can't make a decision unless you have that information. You've got to know, where am I? If you're not feeling well, you go to a doctor. You don't just say, what, I'm not feeling well, but it's in the middle of the week. Maybe I could wait till Saturday. You tend to check things, or your car. If your car is making a funny noise, you don't say, what, um, we're 2 weeks away from payday. I'll just ignore that noise and wait till then, right? Because you still don't want that car shutting down on the road. With your spending, it's better to check it now. You know, see see what's happening. Always do that check. It's never too late,
That is
right?
great advice. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for that. And you mentioned earlier about spending
Hmm.
with purpose, which I find is
Hmm.
quite interesting
Yeah.
because if you've not been, brought up with parents who understand financial
Hmm.
literacy, it's
Hmm.
difficult for a lot of folks. They may be on two extremes, justifying
Hmm.
their spend and like, well, I need this pair of
Hmm.
shoes,
Yeah.
or I need to go out to see my friends. But there's the
Hmm.
other side of it, which is, and you mentioned, is guilt-free spending.
Hmm.
Why is it important to have that as part of your check-in, mid-year financial check-in?
Okay. First of all, your financial planning and your check-in. We start off from a point of, why am I doing this? Who am I working for? And um, if you're earning money because you probably want to enjoy a particular lifestyle. So we are committed to our bills. So we pay tea and tech, we pay WASA, we pay the mortgage, we pay the rent, we pay all of the things that's part of our cost of living. Um, what do you pay yourself? You know, so, and what you pay yourself has two aspects. You've got what you're paying your current self. What's the life I want to live now? Do I want to be able to go out to lunch with friends every once in a while? Do I want to take my family out on a nice dinner once a month? You know, do I want to play mass every carnival? What is it do I want? Um, how do I want my life to be while I'm on this planet? And then there's another part of your income that says, what do you want your future self to have? You know, so the same way you're putting aside, you're spending your bills and your commitments, you need to spend on yourself. And if you you treat your future self, your investments as a priority, and you say, okay, I'm just going to call a figure. I'm going to save 20% of my income for my future self. If that's done every month, you cover your target savings investment percentage, you cover your fixed commitments, then the surplus, that's your guilt-free money. You don't have to feel bad if you take your guilt-free money and you go to a FET, you go to a Lime, you go on Amazon, you buy something. There must be some amount that you could spend for you.
Love that. And I think that's so important for a lot of us to hear because we always have people referencing folks who go on one extreme, but I think the other extreme
Hmm.
of not enjoying life is such an important conversation
Hmm.
to have. And you
Right.
mentioned carnival there, and I'm just like, whew,
Hmm.
yeah, I
Yeah.
need to justify that next year. So
Hmm.
we're gonna go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna
Hmm.
ask the hard questions. Is your
Hmm.
saving strategy working? So we'll be right
Hmm.
back.
Hmm.
And welcome back to
Hmm.
Straight Off the Bat, a show that helps you understand financial literacy and education. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're doing so from YouTube, don't forget to
Mhm.
Subscribe to our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing how to do a mid year financial checking in 2025. And not to worry, I know it's August, but it's never too late to do that check in. We're joined by Andre Falby, and he is the Chief Risk Officer at Trinidad and Tobago Mortgage Bank. And we want to tap into his 30 years plus experience to learn how to manage money. So before the break, I asked a question and just kind of going into a lot of things that we covered today is,
Mhm.
how can someone tell if their saving strategy is working? So, Andre, take it away.
Mhm. Okay, and you know what? Keeping it simple. Look at where you were in January at the start of the year, and look at where you are today. And when I say look at where you are, look at the balance. Look at the balance of your savings or investment accounts. Is it increasing? If today that figure is more than where you were in January, then that suggests that it's working. If it's less or if it's the same thing, then maybe it's not working. All right. So that's the big thing. Your balances must be higher. You must be getting better as time go by. All right. And the second thing, if it's working, do you have enough or do you have a significant amount of guilt-free spending? If you feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck, or you feel that every time I spend money on something nice or I spend something for me, I have anxiety about it, then maybe something is not working. Maybe you've really got to look at that, your spending pattern again and see what's going on. And just to come back to, a point you had asked earlier, when we're looking at our spending, right? What if, people always say, but I don't have any money left over. When we do that critical look at our spending, you know, you could ask yourself I don't want to say easy, let's say hard. Ask yourself some hard questions. When I look at that statement and I see where the money is it going to stuff that I like or stuff that I want? Or do I don't know where it goes? Um, you can look at your bank statement and see, okay, I'm seeing I spent $500 at a restaurant, but that was the day I took but that was the day I took the kids out for a special after school treat. And you remember that day. That's $500 well spent. But if you look and you see $500 Amazon and you can't for the life of you think, what did I spend that 500 on? Then that's not money well spent if you can't even remember where it went. All right. So looking at those kind of patterns would that puts you on that'll help you get to that point where we can improve. Yeah.
Such great points, Andrea,
Yeah.
especially since Amazon is one of the top 10
Hmm.
visited sites in Trinidad and Tobago.
Hmm.
We know, guys, we know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it may not be
Hmm.
necessary if it's not fulfilling your financial goals. So,
Hmm.
shout out to Aidan Chen, who's joining us from YouTube. It just seems as though he knows you, Andre. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah. Hey, Ian. Yeah.
All right. So we're heading back to some questions and we want to find out what are some of the common mistakes because I know you
Hmm.
mentioned earlier about
Hmm.
guilt-free spending, net worth,
Yeah.
all these somewhat
Hmm.
technical things for a lot of people who aren't
Hmm.
familiar with managing their money. So just give us a few common mistakes that we all fall victim to and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be a few of them if not all. So let us know.
All right. So I think top of the list would be looking only at expenses and not income. You know, if someone is running a business, they don't only look at expenses and look at costs, and they look at income and expenses. And if a business isn't, wants to achieve their goals, they look at way to increase sales, increase revenue. As an individual, we should do that as well. So we look at our expenses, but look at our income. Is there something I can do to increase my income? You know, can I, we live in a side hustle world, right? Everyone has a side gig doing something else. Is there something I could be doing to earn extra income? Or am I due for a raise? Am I due for a career change? How can I change that income line? All right. So that's just one issue. Another common mistake is focusing on the small stuff, focusing on the pennies. Sometimes people get obsessed. You go to a coffee shop and you spend $30 on a caramel latte. That's not a big problem, but you're ignoring a $4,000 monthly car loan payment that you can't afford. You know, that might need more greater attention. You know, can I afford $4,000 a month on a car loan payment? For some people, that's fine based on your income. But if that's a strain, then maybe it's time to make a change. Maybe, you know, can we make a change there? Get something more affordable. Also, emotionalizing the numbers. Don't Numbers are data. The numbers don't judge you. So you don't look at the numbers and feel shame and feel guilt and stuff. Look at the numbers, it's information, and then you decide what you want to change in that information. And I guess one more mistake, I guess a final mistake, I don't want to go too much into mistakes, um, trying to make huge overhauls. So saying things like, I'm never going to eat out again. I'm going to stop buying lunch. I'm never go to another cooler fete. You know, those aren't, you're not going to achieve anything that way. Make small, sustainable changes. So you know what? Maybe I don't have to buy that caramel latte every single day. Maybe I could cut back on that. Maybe when carnival time comes around, I don't have to go to 10 cooler fetes. I could probably cut it down to five. Make sustainable changes that you can live with that will improve your well being. Right.
Love that advice, especially since, we are consuming so much content online that could
Yeah.
borderline be extremism sometimes.
Hmm.
And you mentioned something that I remember because there was this popular article that was circulating about, not to go get your coffee. And this is like a huge, if you put that $30
Hmm.
aside.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because there's so
Hmm.
much information out there that caters to the
Hmm.
US market.
Hmm.
So I'm going to go off script for a second, Andrew, and ask,
Hmm.
what popular advice have you seen out there that you're not falling for, especially when it comes to being in Trinidad and Tobago and being from Trinidad and Tobago?
Hmm. But popular advice. Hmm.
Yes.
Okay. I think I want to say a lot of advice out there really does cater for the US markets. So I think when we're looking at advice, you have to ask yourself, um, does this work in Trinidad and Tobago? So for example, you're reading things online, it tell you a lot about um, you know, it tell you don't buy a new car, buy a gently used car. But let's get Trinidad and Tobago. In Trinidad and Tobago, you know, the a new car is probably more comfortable to finance than a used car. So my advice might probably be maybe still look for that new car, but look for the car that you can afford. You don't have to buy the most expensive car. You know, it may be better to get a new car in your price range. Sometimes people say, no, well, what if I get a used luxury car? That's value for money. But we forget that in Trinidad, luxury cars, they cost a lot to maintain as they get older. Everything's imported, so that throws the cost out there. Right?
Such important
Yeah.
points to think about, especially since
Hmm.
we I see things about stock markets and things like that
Hmm.
into
Yeah.
savings, but it's not relevant to our space, so we have to be
Hmm.
really mindful and follow
Yeah.
shows like Straight Off
Yeah.
the Bat, which has more
Hmm.
localized
Hmm.
information. So, do you have any suggestions, advice on some tools and templates that will
Hmm.
make financial check-ins easier?
Yeah. y- you know, First of all, use something that you can use. There are things you can use, a pen and paper. Those of you still old school, you can use. an Excel spreadsheet. I'm a big fan of a simple Excel spreadsheet, where you can just put in income, expenses, and I like to do my budget or my plan for at least 6 months at a time. And the reason for doing it 6 months at a time is that not every expense is monthly. Your car insurance happens once a month, so it shouldn't be a surprise. Sorry, once a year. So you need to cater for that. Um, School opens in September, and the books and all the materials and stuff, these happen once a year. If your children in private school fees are due 3 times a year. So a spreadsheet that caters for several months would be a good way to do that. There are several apps that you can use, apps for your phone. Um, things like Mint and YNAB and so on. I would only recommend that if you're going to use it. It's easy to download apps and then you say, look, this is too much stress. I don't want to be keying in every expense. Every time I spend money, I have to go and put it in this app and so on. All right. So use something that you would definitely use. All right. I keep it simple. All right. I tend to like a simple Excel spreadsheet. And if I can just backtrack a bit, you mentioned before things about stock markets and investing and stuff, and a lot not being available in Trinidad. Um, we in Trinidad and Tobago, we do have quite a lot of investment options. All right. What we need to do as individuals is just be aware. You know, you can go on the website of any financial institution. I'm not going to recommend anybody. Go to any financial institution and just look at our products and look at what is offered. All right. Because if we, the old advice that maybe your grandparents had was just save your pennies in the bank, that may not be appropriate in today's world. But all institutions have, they are mutual funds, they are government bonds, they are fixed deposits. There are a lot of things that that can cater for where you are in life. All right. So my best advice, read, go online and do some research and see what's available. All right. And you'll be surprised that you know there are options to invest your money in Trinidad that can give you returns. You know, the the only solution is not putting it in a plain and simple bank savings account. All right, because of course you won't get any returns in a savings account. Right?
Okay, I think
Yeah.
all important points, and the
Hmm.
the suggestion about Excel spreadsheet brought me back to I was I was I was in a bit of
Hmm.
debt for a while,
Hmm.
and I was very adamant and very focused on coming out of it. So I used
Hmm.
an Excel spreadsheet. So every time I paid for
Hmm.
something, I had my receipt, and I would sit
Hmm.
down and go through every week.
Yeah.
And that helped me because I mean, we have so many options nowadays with these apps, but that doesn't
Hmm.
necessarily mean you're going to use
Yeah.
them, right?
Hmm.
And as you said, as much as I spend a lot of time online, my pen and paper, very
Hmm.
important.
Yeah.
So it's like choose what you're going to use, because just because someone
Hmm.
advised you should use an
Hmm.
application doesn't mean that you're going to be using it as
Hmm.
well. So I think those are all important pointers.
Hmm.
Um, so, when we are talking about this financial check-in, I think it's so important to have help.
Hmm.
A lot of people would see at the beginning it could be their parents, their aunt, their uncle, their
Hmm.
cousin. And nowadays, especially if you are in the ecosystem and the banking ecosystem, you have a financial advisor or a banker.
Hmm.
So we're gonna go on a break, but when we come back, we're gonna ask Andre, how often should we check in with somebody like that to help
Hmm.
us with our media financial
Yeah.
check-in. So we'll be right back.
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
welcome back to Straight Off the Bat, a show that helps you understand financial literacy and education. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're doing so from LinkedIn, don't forget to subscribe to our page to continue seeing content that'll help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing how to do a mid year financial check in for 2025. And we're joined by Andre. He is the Chief
Mhm.
Risk Officer at the Trinidad and Tobago Mortgage Bank. And we've discussed so many things, not to worry. If you missed any of this, this will be across social media. And if you're like the View 868 on YouTube, he's chimed in into a lot of the discussion. Always remember psychology of money, all
Mhm.
finance is personal, and check your net worth at least once a year. So
Mhm.
thanks so much for joining us today on YouTube. So just before the break, we were having a discussion around, you know, having that financial advice through somebody
Mhm.
within the financial space, it
Mhm.
through a bank, through, even Trinidad and Tobago Mortgage Bank. Like that is a
Mhm.
financial discussion to be had when you're
Mhm.
purchasing a home. So
Mhm.
how often should someone do that check-in to help with their mid-year financial review?
Okay, well, I mean, for a regular person with a solid financial system, I think once a year review is probably enough. A good financial advisor is someone is not someone who you need to check in with every week. Maybe a once a year, and they should have a plan that works for you so that you can live your life. And outside of that once a year check in, you should also check in with your advisor when something significant happens in life. So if you get a raise or you get a new job, a new job, you'll be in a different financial land space now, you should probably check with your advisor. If you get married, if you have a child, or if you just inherited some money, if it's a significant life event that's going to impact your finances, that's a good point to do a check-in.
Wow, that's such a great
Mhm.
point, because a lot of folks, when we see money come in, something new come up, you have a
Mhm.
new opportunity. A
Mhm.
lot of us are thinking, okay, how am I going to spend this? Because
Mhm.
I have, set strategy. So I'm going to do
Mhm.
this every month, but
Yeah.
this extra money has come in. And how many
Mhm.
of us fall into the trap of, okay, well, since I have this extra money, I'm going to do two extra fets this next year for
Mhm.
Carnival. What is the best way not to fall trap to this extra money has mean that I'm gonna have extra expenses.
And that's why planning with your numbers comes into play. If your plan is to save 20% of your gross income, when you get a raise, your pay increases, you get a new job, your savings will automatically go up as well because you have decided I'm going to spend 20%, I'm going to save 20%. All right. If you don't have such a plan, what's going to happen? As humans, our default method is to upscale our lifestyle. So we get extra money. If we don't increase our savings and investment plan, that extra money is going to go into to just spending, regular spending. Or it might just automatically go into paying more bills because you know what? Our cost of living goes up with inflation. So, rents and groceries, everything goes up. So naturally, our savings should go up as well. So that plan keeps you on track. All right. And remember, a lot of us say, I will start to save or I will do things when I get a raise. And then you get a raise, but without a plan, nothing happens.
Yeah, Andre,
Mm.
why are you talking to me so? I don't understand this personal attack that you have on me. It's unnecessary.
Uh,
So, when it comes to debt repayment
mm,
strategies, and we may have folks watching this thinking, okay, I
mhm,
have this certain amount of debt that I have, and
mhm,
something may have changed and increase or decrease.
mhm,
How should the strategy be reassessed? How
mhm.
would you assist someone in that discussion?
Okay, first of all, where debt is concerned, again, let's not, you don't want to be emotional where debt is concerned. You know, a business would manage assets and liabilities, because in fact, the typical business would incur debt to acquire assets, to generate revenue. So, and as humans, as individuals, we also get into debt to acquire assets. We have a mortgage to get a house. All right. And I mean, I don't have to say full disclosure because I'm sitting in TTMB, right? So we do mortgages. But if you want a home, most likely you need a mortgage. So that's a good debt. If you need a car, you probably need to take a car loan as well. Where things get a little problematic is where you get into debt, but you can't match an asset to that debt. And I'm looking at that credit card. So credit card debt is very easy to get into credit card debts, just spending money and not knowing what you spent it on, and then there's a big credit card debt. Credit card debt carries the highest interest rate you can possibly, the average rate is 24 to 26% per annum. If for some reason you're carrying credit card debt, you need to tackle that first. Find a way to eliminate that debt. Um, so and if you've got several debts, whether it's credit card, high purchase, different things, you could a good approach would be tackle the highest interest rates first. So if the credit card has the highest rate, you know, pay down that as quickly as possible, get that off. And as one debt is gone, you take that off, move to the next one. But get to the point of having very little to zero consumer debt. Pay down as quickly as possible. All right. In fact, once you pay that down, then it frees up money for investing.
Yeah, I think the idea of separating emotion from
Mhm.
numbers
Yeah.
is an exercise we all have to try to
Mhm.
do every single day, because
Yeah.
we are living in a world where we associate emotion with purchasing.
Mhm.
So that would be an exercise for a lot of us. And for parents who are joining and watching
Mhm.
this, how important is it to involve children into budgeting and having this financial awareness?
Oh, very, very, very important. Earlier, Pauline, you mentioned, some people may not have grown up with parents who were very financially literate and stuff. And I'd like to think that, we know a little bit more now, right? So, um, as parents, involve your children. Now, I'm going to say involve your children. Um, you go age appropriate. So you don't share your entire financial life with your children, right? You don't tell them, well, we have so much debt and all that. You don't put pressure on them, but you teach them in a practical way about money. So, for example, you give them a basic allowance. Now, you must give your children allowance, right? But give them a basic allowance, but make them earn extras. All right. After a certain age, children could start earning extras, washing the car, power washing, weed whacking. The stuff um that you if things that's consuming your Saturday or Sunday, you know, let them do that and pay them for it, right? Um Expose them to certain parts of the family finances. So maybe groceries, light bill, let them just be aware that take them to the grocery with you. So when you're grocery shopping with them, they're seeing how you buy things, and they're right there when the cash when the figure comes up in the cash register, and you got to swipe that card so they can see, hey, this is what we spend on groceries. You know, um, let them see the light bill, so that way they could understand when you're telling them why you turn off the AC before you leave home, or don't put one shirt in the dryer and switch it on for 1 hour. All right, so let them be aware of these things, and you know what, expose them to the back to school budget as well. Let them see, well, okay, we've got so much to buy. We have books, uniforms, and stuff. Um, and don't do it in a way that to make them feel guilty you got to spend all this money, but just so that they're aware that these are things. you know, and of course teach them to save, um, teach them to when I say save, teach them to save, but to spend their own money and let them make mistakes. So if you give them an allowance, if you allow them to earn money doing, whether it's washing the cow or cutting the grass, and you let them earn that money, don't be that helicopter parent and tell them, okay, save this, do that. Let them run with it. If they spend all the money and they're gonna learn a lesson on their own that if I spend all my money, I don't have money for something. I don't have money to go to movie town next week because I can't come and ask some money for movie town doing that I just got paid for doing something. All right. And you know what? If they make mistakes with $100 when they're children, that's better than making mistakes with $10,000 when they're older.
Super important, and
Yeah.
that conversation around allowance is very
Yeah.
interesting because I mean I didn't grow up with any,
Hmm.
but it's interesting to hear people speak now within my
Hmm.
age group,
Hmm.
and the cost of a tooth has risen
Hmm.
multiple times. I hear people
Hmm.
getting $100 for a tooth.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's a
Hmm.
a very bougie tooth fairy. So when it comes to this conversation, and you mentioned a few things there, but I want to reiterate by
Hmm.
asking why it is important to have your children not just have an allowance, but be taught about the importance of that transaction, because money
Hmm.
is a part of life. It's a fact.
Hmm.
And a
Yeah.
lot of folks may go on the other extreme and just, whatever their child wants, they just give it to them.
Hmm.
Why is that important for a parent to hear in terms of setting them up for the future as an adult?
Hmm. You know what? Because at some point, your children are going to be adults, and you'll be amazed at how much people enter the workforce without a clear understanding of of money and how money works. Sometimes some people may their first salary could be spent in a week because they've never had that understanding of know how do we budget and make money last for a while. Because there are some parents who don't even give their children an allowance. They just give them whatever they want. But that creates a feeling that you can just ask for something and things come on demand. But that's not how the world works. So it's really better that children learn, get comfortable with money. Money isn't a bad thing, so we don't have to protect children from it. It's a life skill.
I like that. The idea of money is a life skill.
Hmm.
It's definitely something that in terms of our culture in Trinidad and Tobago, yes, I'm generalizing, but a lot of
Hmm.
parents who like, oh gosh, another outing, oh gosh, another
Hmm.
book.
Hmm.
There's that extreme, or there's
Hmm.
there's always something that, the
Hmm.
school wants. So having those conversations in a relationship with your child is so
Hmm.
important, because,
Hmm.
then they wouldn't have to struggle as hard or as long to ensure that they are able to do this mid-year financial check-in.
Hmm.
So we are going to go on a break, but when we come back, we're going to answer Navin's question. He is on YouTube and has a very specific question about mortgage in arrears. So we'll
Hmm.
answer that on our way back. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Welcome back to Straight Off the Bat, a show that helps you
Hmm.
understand financial literacy and
Hmm.
education. Thanks so much for joining us today. And if you're doing so from YouTube, like Navin, ensure to subscribe to our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing how to do a mid year financial check in with Andre Falby. He's joining us from the Trinidad and Tobago Mortgage Bank. He is the Chief Risk Officer. And with that rule of over 30 years in experience in risk management, we have a question from Navin that we want to direct
Mhm,
to Andre. And it seems like a very specific question, Navin. So we're going to ask,
mhm,
what are some of the solutions available to someone whose mortgage is in arrears? Example, 3 months and no assets to fall back on. What can the finance company do to assist? Any feedback there,
mhm.
Andre?
Yeah, sure. And this would apply for any debt that you're in, that you're in arrears, and um for some, life happens, and sometimes people in a situation where you can't meet your current commitments. um the biggest mistake you can do is to ignore it. Never ignore any kind of arrears or problems to make your payments. Your first thing you should do is get in touch with your lender, get in touch with the bank, the lender, and explain the situation, and you know explain what is the reasons for the arrears. I mean, every case is different, and in most cases a bank will be willing to work with you, right? But you now have to get the position of paying off the arrears and getting back on track, right? And again, we don't want to personalize things. um you don't go with don't go with an attitude that, you know but banks are making millions and billions of dollars. Why do they need my payment? you know that's, again, that's not how business works, right? um it's in your interest to make sure your commitments are paid. You don't want to, I mean, if you've got a mortgage, that means the mortgage secures your home. All right. So you don't want to jeopardize, your home. All right. And in most cases, something can be worked out. If it's a matter of temporary unemployment, you know, you can work on a arrangement to settle those arrears and get back on track. Right. The actual solution will always depend on the situation at hand. But, you know, my advice, take action. You know, visit your lender, have a discussion and see how you can solve it. But don't ever ignore it.
Okay. Thanks for that, Navin. Thanks for that
Mhm,
question joining us from YouTube. So we're going to switch up a bit, going back to what we were discussing before the break when
mhm,
it comes to being a parent and having this discussion with
mhm,
your children. And of
mhm,
course, the back to school is happening and it's coming and
mhm,
traffic is going to return to what it was,
mhm,
unfortunately. But when it comes to having that conversation with parents looking to avoid financial stress in the school
mhm,
term, I think this is a great time to have that discussion. What advice would you give to parents, especially, you mentioned earlier about getting the books,
mhm,
all these new school uniform, who and grew up and is
mhm,
5 inches taller, so you have to buy new
mhm.
pants.
Yeah.
Give us some advice for the parents out there.
Okay. First of all, you've got to plan these things. You know, Back to school is not a surprise. You know, if you're a parent, you know that you're gonna have to buy books and uniforms in time for September. So you can start planning for that from January. If you put aside, you know, $200 in a special account, or you cater for that each month to take care of that September expense. In fact, if you put aside some money each month from January, you know, by July, you're in a position to cover the school books. And of course, you're going to hold back some money until August. The only thing you need to buy in August is the school uniforms, because, you know, um, I mean, my children are grown now, but having three children, I know that growth spurts happen between June and September. So you're not going to buy uniforms in July, but you cater for it. You can put aside that money in advance. Save a bit and plan for it. And that expense is going to happen every year. So, but that's life. It's one of those costs of living. And Pauline, you made a comment earlier, about the schools always want something and there's always some activity. I think as parents, you also need to be careful how we speak about, the cost of school to our children. Um, you know, I'm not picking on carnival or anything, but if you're a person who really enjoys carnival, you don't complain about, oh gosh, every week is a fete. You don't complain about, every year these fete prices going up and so on, right? Similarly, if your children in school, you shouldn't be complaining about every month there's an outing, every month there's a sports day, every term every year there's a sports day or something. Um, we need to understand this is part of the going to school experience, and you shouldn't make your children feel guilty that they've got a sports day coming up. That's part of life. And you need to cater for it. All right. And part of financial planning is that, we don't feel stressed about things that should be normal in our lives. All right. Going on a field trip, the school going on a field trip, that should be a normal part of life. That should not be stress. All right.
I really like those examples because they're very specific to Trinidad, and kind of went into my childhood there for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I would like you to reiterate because let's be honest, especially
Mm-hmm.
with social media, everybody's complaining, right? Everybody's complaining
Mm-hmm.
about something, but they
Mm-hmm.
still would go ahead and pay whatever they need to be, and
Mm-hmm.
it's in the context of parents as
Yeah.
well. I would like you to share what your opinion is on why that complaining about money with your children,
Mm-hmm.
why does that affect the relationship with money for that child as they become
Mm-hmm.
an adult? Why is that important to basically expose and have a discussion about?
Mm. Yeah. You know, we need to be able to have a healthy relationship with money and with finances. Finance is the way we go about go about funding our lives, and we go about it facilitates what we do. And you you don't want to create a scarcity mindset where children believe that every dollar spent is a problem, and feel guilty about spending money. That's not the way to live. All right. So you want to have you want to, by and again, by showing children that yes, we have these bills to pay, we have stuff to pay, but you know show them the other side as well. If we let's say not spend on on food every day. Let's say you pack your lunch. Teach them to make sandwiches and help prepare lunch kits and so on. If you tell children, if you pack lunch as often as possible, you know and that means once a month, we can have a family day at TGI, or a family day somewhere, a movie town date. We can do something special. It shows them there's some balance to life. All right. um you know but don't don't make spending be a problem, or it's a bad thing. It's just what you do. You put gas in the car because you need to go somewhere. It's not a bad thing to have to spend money on gas. It's not a good thing. It's just a thing that you can't use gas. That's how we go places. You know.
I think my
Yeah.
biggest takeaway from this, how to do a mid-year financial check-in, for me personally, is the idea of that scarcity mindset.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because having emotions with money is
Hmm.
not necessarily the
Yeah.
ideal situation when it comes to
Hmm.
this check-in.
Yeah.
So for me, I'll definitely, that's one of my biggest takeaways
Hmm.
here. And for those watching, as we close off, I would like to know what's one small change someone can make
Hmm.
today to improve their year-end outcome.
I would say automate. You know, we're in a world where things you can automate most of your payments. In fact, most of us already automate the mundane stuff, your life insurance premiums, most of us don't go in and pay life insurance premiums. It's automated. It comes out of either your salary or there's some sort of standing order that comes straight out of your account. You could automate your life insurance payments. Um, the bank makes sure that you automate your mortgage payments and your loan payments. These are all automated. You can automate your savings and investment as well. You can set up an automated system, either standing order or set up an auto payment on online banking to send a fixed sum of money to your mutual fund every month, or send it to maybe a high interest savings account every month. But wherever you're saving, that money can be automated. If it's automated, you don't see it, it gets done. And once you know that that thing is covered, you can go about your life. You don't have to worry about, okay, in fact, if you spend extra money on something frivolous, you don't have to worry about it because you know what? I've already done my savings. I've covered all my bills. All my responsibilities have been taken care of. So if I need to spend money on a hobby or something fun, I can do it. Right?
Especially now, I think a lot of banks have, if not all, have some
Mhm.
form of automation
Yeah,
with
will do.
with
Mhm,
payments as well as bill payments. And I've heard before, and even on this show, folks have said,
mhm.
pay yourself first.
Yeah.
Um, I just want to, because we have a couple more minutes, just to explain and expand on what does it mean to pay yourself first.
Mhm. Okay. Paying yourself first, really, you don't treat your savings. And I'm saying in this short time, we can't get into the whole difference between savings and investing, right? You save first, and then from your savings, you invest to make returns. But starting point, you need to put aside some money. That is money for your future self. All right. And you don't treat that savings as the change. You don't pay all your bills and they say whatever left over, I'll put that towards savings. Treat your savings as one of your commitments. You've got to pay electricity, you've got to pay water, you've got to pay the cable, you have to pay cell phone, you have to pay yourself too. You have to send some money to your savings. Treat that as a bill, as a commitment. All right, and that's paying yourself first. It's you're ranked. You rank along with everybody else. You don't pay yourself last. You don't say, well, after everyone gets paid, I'll take the residual for my savings. Savings should be number one. Right?
Okay, that's
Yeah.
great.
Your
Well,
future
on
self
that
will thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
and for those who are watching, I'm pretty sure that will definitely be applicable. Thanks so
Mhm.
much for joining us today, Andre, as well as to Tag, who is very happy with this conversation.
Mhm.
Absolutely excellent presentation and tools going forward.
Mhm.
So thanks again for joining us for the how to do a mid-year financial check-in for
Mhm.
2025. Don't forget to sign up to be notified for our next live show. It's in the comments. It's either there or there,
Mhm.
depending on where you're watching this.
Mhm.
YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. It's all
Mhm.
available. As always, be sure to like and follow our pages across social media so you don't miss a single live show. And thanks again for joining us today. See you soon. Bye.